The person that I wanted to be in mold is very different than the person I am today. And even though I think that mold is absolutely wicked, absolutely evil, and in many ways I think that it's demonic, and it just consumes chaos, I also think that with anything in life, any tragedy in life, you can use it as an opportunity to grow from it. Or you can, ask God and pray to God that He will guide you to change and guide you to self-improvement. Because me personally, I was not ready to change who I was as a person before I was in mold. Not at all. It's interesting because even though I consider mold and my time in mold to be absolute hell on earth, and I felt like it lasted an eternity, I really do. I still don't wish I was the person that I was before mold either. Because before mold, when I look back at that person, it's not that I don't like that person, because that person was who she needed to be, or who she felt she needed to be. But I'm just so relieved that I'm not that person. I was so consumed in so much evil. First off, like actual evil and versions of witchcraft and just New Age, all these occult practices. I mean, really, yikes. And I always tried to frame it in a way that was that appeased my Christian self, and I don't wish to be that person again. And I'm very glad, if anything, if I learned or gained anything from mold, it is the transformation. I'm very, very glad that mold transformed me, or more so that God was able to use the mold to transform me, and that it wasn't just an all-around awful thing, that I came out of it better than I was before I was even in it. I'm very thankful for that, because that could have also not been the case, and that would have been a tragedy. Truly. Before mold, when I think back to my goals before mold, what I wanted and who I wanted to be, the lifestyle I wanted to live, it was so chaotic. I wanted to be a busybody. And, I think that's who I thought I needed to be. But I'm so glad that I don't feel the need to be that anymore. I also, I was very open about this with myself, but I was a busybody. I wanted to be a spectacle. Even visually. I grew up pretty poor, not having a lot of money, but in my head I thought, well, once I get enough money, then I will dress like a spectacle. Then I will dress so out there that, it'll be shock value. And I thought that there was something very, very cool about that. you know? And I also thought that I wanted everything to be bigger and larger than life. Almost like I had to prove something to somebody, you know? A big house, a very busy life. Everything perfect, everything polished, everything organized. That in my head, that's exactly what I wanted. I was very open with myself to admit that I was very materialistic. I'd admit it to myself. But I also tried to, you know, make that okay morally to myself. Like, well, it's okay that who cares that I like material things? Who cares that it's. And, to some degree, sure, whatever, but, like, I did feel like I needed that to prove something to life, you know? Like, take that, I won't be poor forever, and not only will I not be poor, I will also have everything, and everything will be big, and everything will be expensive, and everything will be the most expensive, and everything, and even my taste was always whatever, like, I usually gravitated towards whatever was most expensive, most polished, most, like, grandeur, you know? um, and living in mold really taught me to slow down. I had to slow down. It wasn't a choice, you know? That lesson was sort of forced on me. It was either slow down or keep fighting it until I'm forced to slow down, which is actually what ended up happening. But I'd slow down and still fight it every chance that I got. I didn't like the idea of taking time to breathe and taking time to think, especially since before mold, right before mold, about the year before mold, or maybe a year or two before it, I was so severely depressed. I didn't like to think. I did not like to stop and be with my thoughts. I loved to be go, and just, and it's interesting because I think a part of me was a little self-aware, a little bit, that I was doing that. But I also didn't care. Because I didn't know how else to face it. I didn't know how else to face it, or if I could face it head on, if I could sit there with my thoughts. And then being in mold, I was forced to sit with my thoughts. I was either forced to sit with my thoughts, or sometimes that was very hard and almost too much to bear, but especially with everything that was going on during the mold, it was absolute chaos. But it was weird. It was a still chaos. Like, it was like everything is falling apart, but everything is also still moving so slowly. And even when I would stop, it was either stopping to think, or it would shut your brain off and go online. And there's only so much of that you can tolerate, at least for me. I know there's some people who could be online all day, never go outside. You know, those people who don't feel a call to go in nature, or those people who don't feel a call to go breathe some air outside, or, you know, they can watch a movie all day. That's not me, to my core. So it was hard to, it was either, you know, live with your thoughts or go online, and that's, I don't know, that was really difficult to deal with. I mean, among everything else, that was also a difficulty. But it forced me to change as a person. It also forced me not to be such a perfectionist. I still am to some degree, and I think that I'm learning how to not be that. Like, I'm learning slowly how to draw every last bit of that out of me. But I was such a perfectionist. Even my style, everything that I saw was through that perfectionist lens. Everything had to be just so, or else I felt like I was gonna crack a little bit, you know? And yet, you know, being through the mold, it really drew that out of me. You know, for a long time in mold, I had these big goals and big dreams of this is how I'm going to be successful in my career, and this is how I'm going to do it. And these are the like, I mean, this is my 5-year plan. This is like what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it, and this is what's going to happen. And that didn't happen. That could not happen. I was slowed down. And not only that, but, you know, we moved into not this house, but we moved into the house, and I would even look around and be like, okay, this is how I want everything to look, and this is how I want everything to be. And the progression of this room will even be a progression of how well I'm doing in my successful life. And that's not how it was. I was forced every day to look at the cardboard box that everything was sitting in. You know? I had a bed in a cardboard box, and that was my life, and that was my room. And as sad as that was, it was so depressing and debilitating. It also was such a good cleanse, and I needed that, because I also know that absolutely nothing in this world would have made me not be the way that I was, except for something drastic like this to happen. I would have been that perfectionist, and I would have ran myself into the ground. And I know that about myself, because I felt like that was so ingrained in me, or so instilled in me, I guess I should say, that that wasn't going to move. That wasn't going to change until something drastic had to happen for me to learn that lesson and break me out of that mold. And I'm very glad for that, because that wasn't a healthy way of being. And I know that would have caused so many problems for me in the long run if I would have even been able to make it that far. That wasn't meant for me. You know? And now I'm noticing that I'm a perfectionist in some ways, and like I said, I'm really trying to work on myself about these things, but I'm nowhere near where I was before. And I'm also learning that that aided to creativity. That perfectionism stunted creativity in so many different ways. And I didn't even realize that until I was in the middle of mold, in the middle of my sickness. I didn't even realize that you know, my perfectionism and my need for things to be such a certain way was hindering me from creating flawless and more natural beauty within my work, within everything. Like, I always had such a struggle when working on projects or when working on anything that I did, allowing it to happen naturally, allowing it to happen smoothly. Or if we didn't do something that looks professional. And that's such a I don't know, such a shame that I was like that, you know? Because we were a family who loved to do projects. We were a family who loved to do, you know, painting projects and whatnot. And I don't know, I always felt this sort of like need for things to be or look more professional or more like I never liked things to look homemade. And I think that's kind of sad because so much of the best art in this world is homemade. You know? Store-bought is so you know, there's so many different ways of looking at it, and back then it's like took completely different, they completely switched over, because I used to think that store-bought and the look of machine made and the look of not even maybe machine made but like not handmade looked more expensive and more clean and polished and whatever and expensive even. And it's such a weird thing because that's completely switched in me now, where I now am able to see that handmade and things with maybe things that aren't so symmetrical and things that are unlike anything else, things that stand out, things that have character and maybe have lived a life even, are so much more expensive. Even not price, I mean, not even just price wise, but just they're expensive in what their value is, their life value. And what they offer the world. That opens the thought to so many other different topics there. I mean, one of the bigger contrasts that I can think of now is I used to want to live in an old house, which, like an old Victorian house, a really big old Victorian house. I used to want that. I even thought, how cool would it be to live in like one of those old Victorian mansions. Like, I really would have thought that was the coolest thing. And I did think that was the coolest thing, and that's what I wanted. Which now I wouldn't do that anyway, just because of my experience with mold. But That's what I wanted. And I didn't want to live in it the way that it was. I wanted everything in it to look like a museum. And I was very self-aware that that's how I wanted it to look. I wanted it to be like we were walking into a time capsule, you know, where, and I also at the same time didn't want to do the work myself. I wanted to, like, my fantasy in my head was I should be so rich and wealthy that I can pay people to do a good job and to do things to make everything look polished and look expensive and look professional. And I want it to feel like I live in a place that isn't lived in. And it wouldn't have been lived in because I wanted to live a life where I wasn't living in my space. I wasn't enjoying my space. I wasn't spending time there. I wasn't being comfortable in it. And that's so, it's so sad when I look at that, because I also see the unhealthiness in that. And so much of that just is so unappealing to me now. How I wanted to kind of rip the charm from it, you know, like part of the charm, I think now I'm able to realize in hindsight that a big part of the charm of these old houses is that they have the character. They look like they've been lived in. They look like they've gone through it a little bit. I mean, sure, you can help it so that way it isn't falling apart, but like that is the charm of an old house. It is the charm of existence, and the beauty of the fact that it's lived so long is the fact that it's held so many memories, and it's held so many families, it's held so many conversations. And you know, that time that, you know, Billy spilled his cereal on the floor and put a dent in the hardwood floor, like, that's a part of it. And I don't know at one point that switched for me. I think it was just over time it did. When I was in mold and I was in sickness and I was sitting there thinking with my own thoughts, and I was forced to experience so many experiences like that weren't perfect and that weren't the way that I wanted them to be. Because I'm a true believer that you either fight against what you're being taught, or you accept and you move into it. Like that's how the world works. And I knew after a while I could not just keep pushing back. I had to accept these changes and maybe even have fun in them, because you can even accept, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to yearn for how it was. And I wanted to not only accept the changes and the imperfections of my life, especially since I didn't know how long I was going to be in the mold. I didn't know how long it was going to last. I wanted to embrace and love the changes. And it became a point while I was in that room. It was the biggest room I had ever had. And it was all to myself until the very end. And my mom and I had to share a room, and that was, you know, fine too. But there came a point in there where I not only started to not mind it, because I did reach those points where I was like, I guess I don't mind that my room looks like this, that I live like this. I mean, obviously I wanted to get out of the mold, but like, I wasn't so focused on this needs to change, and okay, I can't wait till I can get rid of this, and okay, let's decorate this, and let's, you know, when I got past those points, I started to be like, you know what, maybe there's something a little bit that I like, not about this, because I knew that it was a toxic situation and I didn't want to be in a toxic situation. I knew that that was unhealthy, but I started to sort of accept and even enjoy the minimalism of it all. Now, I don't consider myself a minimalist by any means, but I did start to like the quaintness, the living small, not needing everything, and being okay with not needing everything, and almost the, like, how resilient is that? I don't know if I'm using the correct word there, but like, resilient is that to not need so much to be happy? How is, and like, that was such a groundbreaking moment for me to really realize that, oh, I don't need those things to be happy. If I don't get those things, I'll still be happy. And that was really groundbreaking. That really shifted things for me. And I don't know, and how resilient does that make me, or does that make me feel, being able to live off of very little and be happy and be sustained? You know? It's like, it doesn't, those things aren't weighing you down. You're able to move forward in life and focus on what you need to focus on without being held back by the physical things that you carry. You know? I don't know. And there's something so kind of nice about the fact that I didn't have a whole bunch of things to worry about or think about or care about while we were dealing with a difficult situation as well. You know, I have collected music boxes since before I was born. My mom collected my first one for me, and ever since then I've collected over the years, over my life. And so I actually had 2 cardboard boxes in my room. I had one of my music boxes, and then I had one of my clothes. And it's so interesting how your mind shifts like that, because for so long living there, my mind was also consumed about my music boxes. Where am I going to put them? What am I going to do with them? When am I going to break them out? Consumed with a material object, and its existence, you know? Whereas when I started to accept, and I started to even have fun a little bit, you know, I didn't love my situation. It was hell every single moment, but I started to have moments of just accepting, and maybe even finding joy in the small things, and living simply and small for this moment in my life. And I started to realize how grateful I was that I didn't have a whole bunch of things around me, even though before I had been so annoyed that I didn't have a whole bunch of things. Like, like, I hated that I felt poor. And that was so much of my feeling, is I felt poor. And I no longer felt poor, even though I was the poorest that I had ever been. I didn't feel poor anymore. And I feel like that's such a thing, is like, who really is poor? You only feel poor. I mean, really. I mean, you can be poor, but like, really poor, being broke and poor is a feeling that you carry within you. You know? There are so many people out there that live with nothing, and they feel like they have everything. They feel like they have the world. But yeah, that was my thoughts and my feelings about that. But it began to change it for me, and I started to see things differently. And it felt kind of a relief to me that I didn't have that much stuff, and I felt very resilient, like I didn't need that much stuff to survive and live off of. And like, at that point, it was like, it was just me, if that makes sense. All I had to deal with was just me. And then with everything else, you know, that started to, you know, there were so many situations where we had to improvise, because we also lived in a very small town. And a very small town in the Midwest, as you call it, even though we're technically up north. But and you know, as you can imagine, you know, calling companies and they don't do a good job, calling companies and they don't answer, and you end up having to do things on your own and figure things out on your own, fix things on your own. And even that, I had a resistance to at first, and after a while I started to just accept, and even have a little bit of fun. It turned into acceptance, to maybe allowing myself to have a little bit of fun in the adventure of doing things ourselves. A great deal of the time it was hard, even when I had, like, I don't want to say I had fun, but even when I started to be more positive about it, don't get me wrong, it was still very excruciating to do things on our own when we were sick and debilitated. Very, and we wanted to cry. I mean, it was hell on earth for 4 to 5 years. But even with that, I could still find some positivity about it, and that carried on to other things, like projects that we would do well, we didn't really do projects when we were really sick, but even being able to appreciate art that wasn't perfect. Being able to appreciate handmade goods, hand-me-downs, appreciating other things. And appreciating people, you know, around me who have alternative ways of doing things, alternative ways of thinking. And then it started to make me, you know, usually I was very hesitant to those people, like, okay, let's not do it that way, because XYZ might happen, and it's not durable for the future, and it's blah, 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 and like, but then I started to accept those people more and their ideas more, and then it turned into me wanting to become like those people, in the sense of being able to fix things on your own. And how empowering is that, to be able to fix things on your own, make things on your own, and if something breaks, just, we'll figure it out and mend it. I never had that mentality before, ever. And it carries on to all facets of life, you know. Even this, you know, I'm learning as I go that it is okay to make a video that isn't perfect, or maybe it is okay to not do every subject at the time and place that it needs to be. The lighting isn't perfect, the time of day isn't perfect, and that's okay. And that's even a little fun, you know. See, we can have fun in just letting the world sort of guide us, and God guide us, because He'll guide us to when we need to do things, the right timing and everything. And that's sort of the beauty of being authentic, even, is doing things in a very natural, flowing state. Not so structured. I mean, I hated the idea of, you know, those people who have tools, you know, like, you always think of, like, you know, your uncle or your grandpas or whatever, who have these tools that they have used for years and years and years, and all they do is they just, oh, well, this piece fell off, better, you know, duct tape it together, better piece her together. We had a car like that for most of my life, and I hated that with all of my being. I hated the fact that that's how a lot of it was. But it's like, it's crazy, because there's so much beauty in that, and being able to just repair things, because and not having to always buy new. not always trusting new, because new isn't always going to be great. Calling somebody to do your job, they're not always going to do the greatest job either. You know, we've seen that plenty of times. And there's something so beautiful about just patching things up, and the history that thing holds, and the life that thing is carried on, and I don't know, it's so cool. And that is definitely carried on to my present wants, needs, desires for my future and all of that. You know, I used to want to live in a Victorian mansion that looked like a museum, and now I want to live in an Earth ship. You know, patch it up with some cop, something that can last for centuries, and just exists, and creating a legacy instead of a spectacle. And so, I mean, it can be cool, and that's cool that it's cool. But is the intention that it has to look awesome, or is the intention that it is healthy and wonderful and beneficial for all? And is the intention that it benefits you down the road? That it increases your skill level, maybe? That it is a conversation, or like a place where you can all gather and have wonderful conversations? Is it homey? Is it, is it comforting? Is it healthy? Is it a place that's healthy? What kind of environment is it? Is it good for the nature surrounding? Is it going to hold up for generations and generations to come? Is it muddable? Is it something that's willing to be flexible and grow with your growing family, or your future generations past you? Or is it just for you? At least that's what I had to tell myself, or think about. Is it just for me? Is it for something much bigger and better than me? Intention is so important to think about. I think along with this, a big lesson has been trust the process. Trust the process. It's so funny, I still struggle with that one. Even though I have no reason to, because everything around me is proof of trusting the process, of having faith that it'll all work out. This all is. But I still feel that way sometimes. That it's hard for me to trust the process, And even lately, with me not feeling so peak, not feeling so as well as I was last week, having a little dip in my progression, in my health, in my detox process, I was starting to feel very anxious, or restless, I guess I should say, about my future, and wanting everything to happen fast. And I still sometimes have these moments of wanting that, and stunted, like I have a hard time accepting that I can't do everything that I know other people are able to do, or that I would like to try. Even though I feel stunted sometimes, I am reminded that I need to just be present and trust the process. I I've read The Tao of Pooh years ago. It's one of my favorite books. I love it because it teaches Taoism in sort of within a metaphor about Winnie the Pooh, using him as like a reference for how Taoism is, and just having peace within you and trusting, just living as you trust, as though you trust the process. And I had listened to that years ago, or not listened to, I read it years ago. Love it. Hadn't really thought about it in a little while, and I listened to the audiobook last night. I recommend. It's on YouTube. It's only 2.5 hours. It's like the length of like a longer podcast, right? Love it. Love that it's, just right here. And it talked in the book about Wu Wei, which Wu Wei is one of my favorite things to ponder on. It's something, the definition is something like the power of non-action or something, or letting things be as they be, and trusting that things will get done as it's going to happen without you doing anything about it. Ooh, that was powerful when I was in mold. Powerful. The lesson of Wu Wei. Just letting things be. And the power of non-action. Or, maybe even just taking steps forward within faith, without having to dictate or overthink. Ooh, which that's my big issue, is overthinking. But yeah, so I've been really reminded of that lately, and it got me here, and it led me to believing all those things that I believe today, and out of the toxic ways that I was before. And it's still teaching me today how to become an even better person, because I still struggle with so much of this, but yeah, those are some of my lessons that I've learned within mold and when I was sick. Hope you enjoyed this video. I think those are all my thoughts that I have about it for right now. Hope you have a good day. Bye-bye.